Keanu Reeves stepped out of the modest corner cafe in downtown Los Angeles, two steaming cups of coffee in his hands, the city's early morning chill brushing against his face. Dressed simply in worn jeans, a plain dark jacket, and a faded beanie pulled over his head, he blended in with the people hurrying past on the sidewalk, most of whom didn't even glance up long enough to recognize him. But Keanu wasn't looking for attention that morning. His eyes were focused on someone he'd noticed the day before, a man sitting alone on a bench near the edge of the park across the street. The man had a scruffy beard, tattered clothes layered over each other for warmth, and a sign made from a piece of torn cardboard that read, "Anything helps, God bless." Keanu had seen hundreds of people like him over the years, but something about this man's posture, the way he stared at the pigeons with a quiet kind of dignity, had caught Keanu's attention. There was no aggression in him, no loud plea for money, no angry muttering, just silence. A man simply existing, unseen by most. He crossed the street without hesitation and approached the bench, nodding politely as he stepped into the man's view. "Hey," Keanu said, holding out one of the cups. "I figured it's cold out here. Thought you might want something warm." The man looked up, surprised not just by the gesture, but by who was making it. His eyes squinted, confused, and then widened as he processed the familiar face. You're Keanu Reeves," he said, voice hoarse and uncertain, as if unsure whether the cold or his mind was playing tricks on him. Keanu offered a soft smile, settling onto the bench beside him without waiting for permission. "Yeah, that's me. And you're," the man hesitated before replying, "Raymond. People just call me Ray." He took the coffee with both hands, cupping it like a precious thing. "Thank you. I can't remember the last time someone did something like that, without wanting something in return." Keanu chuckled gently, taking a sip of his own coffee. "You don't owe me anything, Ray. Just figured it's a good day to sit and talk with someone." The two men sat there in silence for a few moments, watching the city slowly come alive around them. Keanu didn't press Ray with questions, he didn't pry. He just waited, letting the space between them feel safe. Eventually, Ray exhaled slowly and looked down into his cup. "I used to work just a few blocks from here," he said. "Construction. Back when my back still worked the way it was supposed to. Had a little apartment in East Hollywood, a dog named Benny, and a girlfriend who made terrible pancakes but smiled like sunshine." Keanu listened, eyes focused and attentive, not once interrupting. Ray continued, voice stronger now that it had found footing in memory. "One day I slipped at a job site. Nothing crazy, just a fall. But it screwed up my spine bad. Workers' comp took forever. My boss replaced me within a week. Rent fell behind. My girl tried to hang on, but she couldn't carry it all, and just like that, things fell apart." The honesty in Ray's words hit Keanu in the chest. Not because it was some tragic movie-worthy twist of fate, but because it was real. Brutally real. "That's rough," Keanu said quietly. "A lot of people don't realize how thin the line is between everything being fine and everything falling apart." Ray nodded slowly. "Yeah, you think you're doing okay, until you're not. And once you're down, it's hard to climb back up. People stop seeing you. You become part of the scenery. Like that tree over there, or that trash can." Keanu shook his head, his voice low but firm. "You're not scenery, you're a person. You've got a name, a story. That matters." Ray stared at him for a moment, as if trying to understand why someone like Keanu Reeves would bother sitting on a bench talking to someone like him. "Why are you here?" he asked finally. "You could be anywhere, doing anything. Why are you spending your morning with a washed-up construction worker who can't even afford socks without holes in them?" Keanu paused, then answered honestly. "Because I've been there, in my own way. Lost people, felt alone. Woke up some mornings wondering what the point was. Fame doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't hug you when you're grieving. And I know what it feels like to be invisible, even when everyone knows your name." Ray blinked, visibly moved by the confession. He didn't expect vulnerability, especially not from someone who lived in a world so far from his own. They continued talking for over an hour. Keanu asked questions about Ray's past, not just the hardships, but the parts that brought him joy. Ray talked about his dog Benny, who used to bark at the television anytime someone rang a doorbell in a commercial. He spoke of his mother's lasagna and how he always burned the garlic bread, no matter how closely he watched it. He described summer evenings working on his car while the neighborhood kids raced bikes down the street. And in those memories, Keanu saw the man Ray used to be not defined by his current situation, but by the life he had lived and the quiet strength it took to survive everything after it. At one point, Keanu offered him a sandwich he'd picked up as well. "Not fancy, but it's fresh," he said. Ray accepted it gratefully, his stomach audibly growling at the smell. "You really thought all this through, didn't you?" he asked, half amused, half touched. "Well, I figured if I were in your shoes, I'd want more than just a nod and $1 tossed into a cup." They both laughed softly. It wasn't forced, it came from a genuine place, a moment of shared humanity. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Ray's voice took on a more serious tone. "I don't know what you think you can do, Keanu. I mean, it's kind of you to sit with me, and I'll never forget that. But I've been out here too long. I'm tired. My back's a mess, and I'm not exactly young anymore. Most places won't even let me in the door." Keanu looked at him, the kind of look that made people feel like they were truly being seen. "I don't know what I can do either, Ray, but I want to try, even if it's something small." "You deserve that much." Ray's eyes welled up for the first time, not from pain or cold or hunger, but from the weight of being acknowledged. "No one said that to me in a long time," he said. "That I deserve something." Keanu stood slowly, brushing off the crumbs from his jacket. "I'm not promising miracles, but if you'll let me, maybe we can get a warm meal later. Maybe I can help find someone to look at your back. There's always something, Ray. There's always some way forward." Ray looked up at him, humbled and hopeful, and gave a slow, deliberate nod. "All right," he said. "Let's see what's possible." The air was warmer by the time Keanu and Ray walked side by side down the sidewalk, their steps slow but steady. Ray still moved with a stiffness that came from years of sleeping on uneven ground and old injuries left untreated. But there was a new energy in his pace, something small but present, like a forgotten ember flickering back to life. Keanu didn't rush him, didn't offer an arm or act like Ray was fragile. He simply matched his pace, carrying nothing but a backpack slung casually over one shoulder and an open-hearted calm that followed him like a shadow. They didn't talk much in that first stretch, just listened to the hum of the city, the distant chatter of shopkeepers setting up, the whoosh of buses rolling by, the occasional bark of a dog tethered outside a deli. Ray had never walked next to someone famous before, but Keanu made it feel like nothing unusual was happening. No posing, no pretending. Just two men walking to get breakfast. They found a quiet diner a few blocks away, the kind of place that still had cracked vinyl booths and servers who called you hun without irony. Keanu held the door open, letting Ray enter first, and they slid into a booth near the back, away from the windows. A waitress came by and offered a polite but curious glance at Keanu, clearly recognizing him but choosing not to make a scene. "Coffee?" she asked. Keanu smiled. "Yes, please. And menus if you've got him." Ray rubbed his hands together under the table, nervous, the old anxiety of being in clean spaces creeping back in. "You sure they're not gonna kick me out of here?" he murmured. Keanu leaned in slightly. "They're not. And if they do, we'll go somewhere else. But you belong here just like anyone else." The words settled into Ray's chest like warm water. When the coffee arrived, he took a cautious sip, then let out a small sigh. "Damn," he said. "It's good, real coffee. Not something brewed from whatever the church was throwing away that day." Keanu chuckled softly. They've got a good kitchen too. Pick whatever looks good." The menu felt like a foreign document in Ray's hands. He stared at it, blinking slowly, trying to remember the last time he'd been able to choose a meal from a list instead of just taking whatever was handed to him at a shelter or scraped together with $1 and change. "Pancakes," he said at last. "Haven't had pancakes in years," Keanu nodded. "Then let's get pancakes. I'll add eggs and bacon to that. Sound good?" Ray nodded quickly, his eyes still fixed on the menu like it might disappear if he looked away. As they waited, Keanu leaned back in the booth, watching Ray take in the small details of the diner, the old clock above the counter, the faded posters of 80s movie stars, the smell of butter and syrup floating through the air. It was nothing luxurious, but to Ray, it might as well have been 5 stars. "You ever think about going back to work?" Keanu asked, not unkindly, just curious. Ray exhaled slowly, all the time. "Not the same kind of work, though. My back couldn't take it. And to be honest, I'm scared. It's not just about finding a job, it's about being seen again. Being held accountable again. Out here, you stop being someone people expect things from. You stop being responsible. You just survive. And part of me forgot what it's like to be a real person." Keanu stirred sugar into his coffee, his voice soft. "You've always been a real person, Ray. It's the world that forgets." "Not you." Ray looked down, blinking hard. The food arrived then, breaking the moment, a stack of golden pancakes piled high with melting butter and warm syrup. Eggs cooked just right, bacon crispy at the edges. Ray hesitated only a moment before digging in, his hunger overpowering his self-consciousness. Keanu ate too, though slower, more thoughtful, letting Ray have the moment. Halfway through the meal, Ray looked up, cheeks flushed from eating fast, his voice quieter. "What do you really want to do for me, Keanu? I mean, you already did more than anyone has in years, but what are you planning?" Keanu set down his fork, brushing his hands on a napkin before answering. "I'm not planning to rescue you, Ray. You're not a charity case. I'm just someone with a few more options than most, and I want to use them where they matter. If that means getting you into a place to sleep for a while, or finding a doctor to look at your back, or talking to someone I know about a job that doesn't break your spine, then I'm going to try. But I can't promise it'll all work. I just want you to know you're not alone in it anymore." Ray listened, really listened, and then slowly nodded. "That's the scariest thing out here. The loneliness, not just the cold or the hunger or the pain. It's going through all of it and knowing no one cares if you wake up tomorrow. What you said, it means something." They finished breakfast and left a good tip, Ray walking a little taller now, not because of the food, but because someone had chosen to sit down and listen. Outside, Keanu pulled out his phone, not to film or take pictures, but to call a contact. "I know someone who runs a small clinic not far from here," he said after hanging up. "It's not fancy, but they're good people. They'll check you out and see what can be done about your back. They know I'm sending you." Ray blinked. "Just like that?" Keanu shrugged. "It helps to know a few people." Ray hesitated again, the fear of getting his hopes up creeping in. "And after that?" Keanu gave him a calm, steady look, one step at a time. "Today we take care of your health. Tomorrow, maybe we talk about housing. Later, we talk about work. No rush, no pressure. Just steps." They walked to the clinic together, not saying much, but not needing to. The air between them was no longer filled with hesitation, it held possibility. Keanu stayed until Ray was safely checked in and speaking with a nurse, then promised to return later. "You're not forgotten," he said. "I'll see you soon." Ray nodded, his voice cracking with emotion. "Thank you, Keanu, not just for today, for seeing me, for making me feel human again." As Keanu walked away from the clinic, the sun now high above the buildings, he felt a quiet peace in his chest. Not the kind that came from applause or headlines, but the kind that came from doing something right. Not flashy, not performative, just human. And somewhere behind those clinic doors, a man named Ray was remembering what hope felt like for the first time in years. The weeks passed by with a steady, almost serene rhythm as Keanu kept his promise to Ray, checking in regularly and offering the kind of consistent support Ray hadn't seen in years. The clinic had given Ray some medication for his back pain and scheduled physical therapy sessions, which helped alleviate some of the chronic discomfort that had been nagging at him for so long. More importantly, the staff there treated him like a person, not just as another homeless man who'd wandered in off the street, but as someone with a history, with potential, someone deserving of care. Keanu had taken it upon himself to make sure Ray had all the appointments he needed and had even personally driven him to a nearby shelter that didn't just offer a place to sleep, but also job placement assistance for people getting back on their feet. Keanu's actions weren't flashy. He didn't try to turn this into something it wasn't. He simply showed up when he said he would, and that was more than Ray could have ever hoped for. He'd never known someone could be this reliable, this dependable. For the first time in years, he was starting to believe that change could happen, that he could change too. One afternoon, as they sat together in a small, quiet park just a few blocks from the shelter, Ray finally looked at Keanu with a question that had been weighing on him for days. "You ever wonder why you're doing all this for me?" he asked, his voice low but sincere. Keanu paused, glancing over at Ray as if the question had taken him by surprise. But then, after a moment's thought, he leaned back against the park bench, taking a deep breath as if gathering his thoughts. "I've been lucky, Ray. I've had things come easy for me that other people can only dream of. I've gotten more than I deserve. And maybe that's why I do it, because I can. Because I should." Ray looked down at his hands, his fingers still rough and calloused, even after the weeks of therapy. He could feel the weight of Keanu's words, but it didn't quite settle in him right away. For the longest time, Ray had lived a life of survival, constantly wondering when the next bad thing would happen, the next disappointment, the next failure. He hadn't had the luxury of wondering why someone would help him. It was always a question of how to get by, how to just make it through. "You know," Ray continued after a moment, "I've spent a lot of time thinking about all the things I could have done differently. But it feels like it's too late now. Like I've already missed all my chances. I don't know how to catch up." Keanu looked at him with a quiet understanding, then nodded slowly. "It's never too late, Ray. As long as you're still breathing, there's time. You can start over whenever you choose to. It's all about the decisions you make today. That's the real power you have, the choice to take control of what happens next." Ray didn't say anything immediately, letting Keanu's words sink in. For the first time in ages, he wasn't just hearing words. He was feeling them. It was something simple, but it had a profound effect. The idea of starting over didn't seem so impossible anymore. It didn't seem like some distant dream that had faded with age. Maybe he could build something new. Maybe he could find his way back to a life that felt meaningful, to a future that didn't just revolve around getting by. A few days later, Keanu reached out to a local business owner he knew who was looking to hire someone part-time to help with general maintenance and cleaning around the shop. The work wouldn't be glamorous, but it was a start. Keanu made the call, putting Ray's name forward, and soon after, Ray found himself sitting in a small, cluttered office, meeting the business owner who seemed kind enough, if a little skeptical. Ray wasn't sure what he was expecting, perhaps a warm handshake, maybe a sense of reassurance, but what he got instead was a straightforward conversation. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you," the owner said. "This job isn't easy, and it's not high pay. But it's a job. And if you show up, work hard, and keep your head down, you'll have a chance to stay on and even grow in the company. It's all about consistency. You show me you can do that, we'll talk again in a month. But if you drop the ball, I'll let you go without hesitation. Understand?" Ray nodded, trying to keep his nerves in check. "I understand," he said quietly. It wasn't a promise that things would be easy, but it was a chance, a small glimmer of hope that maybe he could turn this around. The job wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the career he had dreamed of when he was younger, but it was a start. And that, Ray knew, was all he needed right now. Keanu continued to support Ray through every step, making sure he had the tools he needed to succeed, helping with transportation, offering encouragement, and just being there to listen when things got tough. Ray started to show up every day, working long hours at the shop, getting his hands dirty, and feeling a sense of pride that had long since been buried. It wasn't always easy. There were days when the pain in his back flared up again, or when he'd make a mistake that would frustrate him. But with each passing day, Ray found himself feeling a little more like the man he used to be. Not perfect, not all the way there, but better. The path forward was still unclear. He didn't know what the future held. But with Keanu's help, Ray was starting to believe that it was his to shape, that he could be the one to decide what came next. As time went on, Ray began to make small changes in his life. He cut back on drinking and started saving a little money each week, not for anything big, but for emergencies. He even began volunteering at the shelter, helping others who had once been in his shoes. Every little step felt like progress, and he wasn't doing it alone. He had Keanu, who, though a star in his own right, had shown Ray that sometimes the most important thing was not the glitz and the fame, but the simple act of showing up. One evening, after a long day of work, Ray was sitting on the bench at the park again when Keanu came by, just like he always did. This time, there was something different in Ray's expression, a quiet, contented peace that hadn't been there before. "You look better," Keanu said, smiling as he sat down next to Ray. Ray shrugged but couldn't help the small grin that tugged at his lips. "I guess I'm starting to feel better." Keanu nodded. "That's all anyone can ask for. You're doing the work, Ray. You're showing up." Ray's grin widened just a little. "Yeah," he said softly. "And I'm starting to believe I'm worth showing up for." As weeks turned into months, Ray's life gradually started to take shape. His routine, which had once been unpredictable and filled with uncertainty, was now more grounded, marked by the steady rhythm of work and small victories. Keanu, though he had his own busy life, continued to check in on Ray, always offering encouragement without making him feel pressured. It was that balance, Keanu's constant but unintrusive presence, that helped Ray find his footing in a world that had, for too long, felt overwhelming. Ray had become a regular face at the shop, known for his dependability and his work ethic. His back pain still lingered, but it wasn't as all-consuming as it had been before. The physical therapy had helped, and so had the daily routine of hard work that kept his body moving. He wasn't just surviving anymore. For the first time in years, he was beginning to feel alive. And when Keanu visited him at work, it was often with a grin and a few words of encouragement. Things like, "Keep it up, Ray, you're doing great." It wasn't much, but it meant the world to Ray. One afternoon, as Ray was finishing up a particularly grueling day at work, Keanu dropped by with a bag in his hand, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a hint of excitement. Ray looked up from the counter, his hands covered in grease and dust from the day's tasks. "Hey Keanu, what's going on?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Keanu grinned and set the bag down on the counter. "I've got something for you," he said. "A little something to celebrate your progress." Ray raised an eyebrow. "Celebrate? What's this about?" Keanu gave him a knowing look. "You've been working hard. I think it's time you take a small step forward." "Open it." Ray's curiosity piqued. He tore open the bag and pulled out a small but high-quality tool set. It wasn't just any set, it was one that a real professional would use, the kind that could make a significant difference in Ray's work. Ray stared at it, momentarily speechless. "Keanu, this is..." His voice trailed off, still processing the gesture. "It's nothing," Keanu said, his grin widening. "You've earned it, Ray. You've put in the work, and now you've got the tools to match." Ray was overwhelmed, feeling a rush of gratitude that was hard to put into words. For so long, he'd lived without any real hope for a better future, but now with Keanu's help, it was starting to feel like that future wasn't just possible, it was real. "I don't even know what to say," Ray muttered, his eyes misting over slightly. Keanu put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're already on the right path." Ray nodded, the weight of the moment settling over him. This simple act of kindness, of Keanu believing in him enough to invest in his future, was more than Ray had ever expected. And for the first time in his life, he could see a future where he wasn't just someone to be forgotten or overlooked, but someone who had value, someone who could make a difference. In the months that followed, Ray used the new tools to take on more challenging tasks at work, quickly proving himself capable of more responsibility. He took pride in the work he did, knowing that every day brought him one step closer to a better life. He even started to look for a place of his own, something modest, but his own. It wasn't much, but the thought of having a space to call his own felt like an accomplishment in itself. He saved what little money he could from his wages and started searching for affordable places nearby. Through all of this, Keanu was there, offering guidance when needed, but also giving Ray the space to grow. There was no pressure, no rush, just the quiet confidence that Ray could figure it out if he kept going. Keanu had made sure that Ray had every opportunity, but it was Ray who had seized those opportunities, who had put in the hard work. Keanu's support had been essential, but it was Ray's own determination that had truly turned things around. One day, as Ray walked home after another long day at work, he found himself feeling more hopeful than he had in years. The neighborhood, once a place where he felt like an outsider, now felt like home. It was strange to think about how far he'd come, from sleeping on park benches to working steadily and saving for a future. He wasn't rich, and he hadn't found instant success, but that was never the goal. The goal had been simple: to take control of his life, to stop running from his past, and to build something that would last. As he rounded the corner to his small apartment, he saw Keanu sitting on the steps waiting for him. It wasn't uncommon for Keanu to pop by unannounced. He had a way of showing up when Ray needed him most. "Hey, Ray," Keanu called out, standing up as Ray approached. "How's everything going?" Ray grinned and sat down beside him. "Everything's good. Better than I ever imagined." Keanu nodded, clearly pleased. "I'm proud of you, Ray. You've come a long way." Ray looked down at the ground for a moment, then back up at Keanu. "I couldn't have done it without you, Keanu. You gave me a chance when no one else did. I'll never forget that." Keanu smiled, his expression genuine. "I didn't do anything special. I just helped you see that you could do it yourself. You've always had what it takes." Ray felt a warmth in his chest as he listened to Keanu. It was strange, this sense of belonging, of having someone who believed in him, someone who wanted to see him succeed. For so many years he'd felt invisible, but now, with Keanu's support and his own hard work, Ray had started to believe in himself. As the evening wore on, Ray and Keanu talked about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead. Ray was no longer the man he had been when he first met Keanu. He had found something worth living for hope. And for the first time in a long while, he was excited to see where the journey would take him. With a sense of gratitude in his heart, Ray knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would face them with a strength he had never known before. Keanu had helped him find that strength, but it was Ray who had brought it to the surface. And for that, he was more grateful than words could express. As the months passed, Ray's life continued to evolve more quickly than he had ever imagined possible. His work ethic had earned him respect from his colleagues, and the tool set Keanu had gifted him had become a symbol of the new beginning he had embraced. The shifts at the shop became his opportunity to grow, not just professionally, but personally. He found joy in small things like the satisfaction of a job well done, the laughter of his coworkers, and the newfound pride in his independence. But what meant the most to Ray was the unspoken bond that had developed between him and Keanu. It wasn't just about the help Keanu had provided. It was about the belief he had instilled in Ray when no one else had bothered to try. One evening, as Ray finished up another day's work, Keanu showed up, just as he often did, with a warm smile and a bag in his hand. This time, however, there was a noticeable change in Keanu's demeanor. He wasn't just the calm, reassuring presence that had helped Ray in the past. There was something else in his eyes, a sense of anticipation, of something more. Ray wiped his hands on his apron and looked at his friend. "Hey, what's going on? You look like you've got something important to say." Keanu chuckled, a soft laugh escaping his lips. "Actually, I do. But it's more of a surprise." Keanu handed Ray the bag, and Ray, curiosity piqued, opened it slowly. Inside, there was a brand new jacket, dark leather, soft but sturdy, a gift that spoke of accomplishment. It wasn't just any jacket. It was the kind of thing that Ray would have never considered for himself. It was a symbol, not just of where he was now, but of where he was headed. "Keanu, this is..." Ray's voice faltered as he took the jacket from the bag, his hands trembling slightly. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had done something like this for him, something so thoughtful, so meaningful. Keanu smiled, his expression full of pride. "It's a milestone, Ray. You've come so far, you've earned it. It's time for you to start believing in yourself, the way I've always believed in you." Ray stood there for a moment, just holding the jacket, his emotions overwhelming him. The gesture wasn't about the jacket itself. It was about the acknowledgement of his growth, of the person he had become, and the incredible distance he had traveled from the broken man he once was. "I don't know how to thank you, Keanu. You've done more for me than I can ever repay," Ray said, his voice thick with emotion. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder, looking him squarely in the eye. "Ray, you've already repaid me. You've made it. You've shown yourself and the world just how strong you are. This," he said, gesturing to the jacket, "is just a small reminder of how far you've come. But the real victory is in the person you are now." Ray's heart swelled with pride, but there was still a small part of him that couldn't quite believe it. Could he really be the person Keanu saw in him? Could he truly have changed so much? The doubts, though quieter than they had once been, still lingered in the back of his mind. But in that moment, as Keanu stood beside him, offering a quiet smile of encouragement, Ray realized something. It didn't matter what doubts he had. What mattered was that he was no longer the man he had been before. He was stronger, more capable, and most importantly, he was no longer alone. A few weeks later, Ray moved into his own small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was his. And in a way, that was all that mattered. Keanu had helped him find a place to live, a modest but safe space where Ray could finally have a sense of peace. He spent the first night in the apartment with just a mattress on the floor and a few boxes of his belongings, but it felt like home. It wasn't the material possessions that made it feel that way. It was the sense of accomplishment, the knowledge that he had built this for himself from the ground up. Over the next few months, Ray's life continued to improve. He began to forge new friendships, people who saw him for who he was, not his past. He became involved in his community, helping those who had once been in his shoes, using his experiences to guide them through the struggles they faced. He didn't just want to help himself anymore. He wanted to give back, to make sure that no one else had to feel invisible the way he had for so long. And throughout it all, Keanu remained a steady presence in Ray's life. Their friendship, built on trust and mutual respect, grew even stronger. Keanu never expected anything in return. He was simply there, offering encouragement when it was needed and reminding Ray of the strength he already had within himself. It wasn't about the big gestures anymore. It was about the quiet, everyday acts of kindness that had made all the difference. Ray had learned something powerful over the course of his journey. Sometimes, The people who show up when you least expect it are the ones who change everything. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness, a smile, a conversation, a simple gesture can be the spark that ignites a transformation. Ray would never forget the day Keanu had sat with him on that park bench, offering nothing more than a cup of coffee and a listening ear. It had been the beginning of everything, the beginning of his healing, his growth, and his future. And so, as Ray stood at the doorstep of his new life, with the jacket Keanu had gifted him hanging in his closet and the confidence of a man who had fought hard for everything he had, he knew that he was no longer the man who had once wandered the streets. He was someone new, someone worthy, someone capable of building a future. And the most important lesson of all was this, that no matter how broken you are, with the right support and the right mindset, you can always rebuild. Keanu had helped him see that. And for that, Ray would forever be grateful.
Thank you for watching our channel Modern Stories. If you liked our video, you should subscribe for more amazing videos like this. Have a healthy and happy day. See you in the next one.